Hello, everyone. My name is Larry Horn. Thank you very much for joining us today. I am the Executive Director of Amplify, and welcome to our first Amplify Now event, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion in Entrepreneurship. We feel honored and privileged to have such a wonderful panelist join us today. As many of you may know, Amplify is inspired to support startups, innovators, and entrepreneurs to be successful. And as a startup community, we have the responsibility to be intentional and actionable when it comes to being inclusive to all founders. And that includes race, gender, age, sexuality, ability, religion, national origin, gender identity, and other identities. Amplify Louisville welcomes industry agnostic, tech-enabled, scalable startups and founders to connect with us to explore ideas, building solutions, launching products, and growing their business. We provide diverse programming across capital, talent, and customers. Our desire is to do these activities in a coordinated and collaborative manner. And if you know of an event or an organization that is focused on the same segment of our community, please send them our way. We want to partner or support with the work that they're doing. So thank you all for joining us today. We hope this discussion will generate many more conversations around the challenges, opportunities, and potential activities that the collective startup community should focus on. Now I'd like to introduce my good friend, community champion, and manager of entrepreneur selection and growth at Endeavor, Raechele Gray. Raechele, take us away.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Larry, and wow, fantastic. Truly an honor, guys, to be here with you all and to have this amazing discussion with this fantastic panel, all of whom I really have the privilege of considering as friends, colleagues, world-class leaders in their own right from our city. And I can't tell you how grateful I am really to Larry and to the Amplify team, for supporting this and doing this in support kind of our ecosystem. I'm certainly in the company of individuals who embody in action on the ground what startup community building looks like. And so, before we kind of dive right in and get everyone to do a round of intros and kind of give perspective on what they do. As Larry mentioned, I'm Raechele Gray, manager of entrepreneur selection and growth at Endeavor. Quickly, Endeavor is just a global network-driven org that selects and supports high-growth entrepreneurs globally, specifically focusing on geographies that limit that has limited access rather to resources for scaling entrepreneurs. And we do this both locally and globally. But for today's conversation, our aim is, of course, to be focused on generating a candid dialogue to come to solutions and to really share the experiences of, the panel that's before you. But I also want to give credence before we get started, just to, given kind of the dynamics and, the unrest that we are experiencing and really seeing, both in Kenosha that happened this past week, the community, and then our local community rather here in Louisville, and so many other communities really around our nation. The unrest that we're starting to see, hearts are burdened today. And I say that with full kind of discretion, knowing that communities are impacted and hearts are burdened. And before we can even kind of dive into a dialogue about equity, before we can dive into a dialogue about inclusion, it's really important that we recognize that trauma, right? And we recognize first and foremost that the time is now. It's an unprecedented time for this conversation to, not only be taken seriously, but for the eyes and ears of our community to really be precedent towards this issue. And I guess this is all kind of against a backdrop, and we mentioned this before a bit, Dave. This is all against a backdrop of widespread pandemic, kind of economic disparity that we see. I think it's just really important, number one, that we kind of recognize that, our communities are burdened, right? Our communities are feeling kind of the climate in which we are in and kind of dealing with those issues. And again, I just feel like it's really important that we start with just a bit of a framework, if you will, as we go through these questions, as our panelists kind of share a quick just kind of framework that I'd like to offer for us to think through. And so, number one, what I'd love for our panel to do is to come with a lens of authenticity. Again, given the climate of where things are, we must come to this dialogue with sincere authenticity, meaning that as a business community, we can no longer dance around these issues, and we need to address matters hands-on. And so I asked panelists today, come with your individual experience today. Don't be afraid to share. And for the audience that's listening, the experiences that you're going to hear today, believe them, right? Just because don't discredit it because you may not see it, or that it may not be prevalent to you, or that it may not be experienced by you. We all need to come to the table with sincere authenticity to this conversation. The second thing I kind of want to just frame up a bit, if you will, while we're going to come with this conversation with actionable insights and try to give those actionable insights to the community, we also have to come to this conversation and help transition from a stance of awareness and acknowledgement towards accountability. And the reason why I say that again is because, time warrants it. The climate in which we're in, we have to transition from just making statements and just being aware, right? Your great presence in this call, you showing up to this call, everyone has a sense of awareness and know that this is important, and we appreciate that for today's call. But we also want to transition, and I hope that the conversation from today helps us to transition from an awareness standpoint to an acknowledgement standpoint, acknowledging that the disparities that we'll talk about, they didn't happen on their own. They didn't just come out of nowhere, that the unrest that we're seeing just didn't happen by happenstance, that it's very systemic and it's come from over a 400-year unfair monopoly game, right? And so for us, transitioning this conversation from just, form of awareness, getting to a point of acknowledgement, knowing that this is systemic, that this is something that's going to warrant long tenured action, and then transitioning into an accountability. And Louisville needs to be accountable. So my hope is that our conversation today helps us to transition through those three pillars, from awareness and learning the stats. We have plenty, there's plenty of studies out there. There's plenty of case studies, plenty of white papers that can showcase the disparities, the issues, the discrimination that we experience in our venture community, in our entrepreneurial community, and in our economic system. And I also know that, for lack of a better word, we're tired, right? We're ready to have this conversation and dialogue, and we're ready to come to a sense of accountability so that action can take place. So again, just wanted to kind of get that out in the sphere. I wanted to just set the precedent and the tone for the timing that we're in. We must be sensitive of that, knowing that the people who are watching from every corner of the region, that our communities, they're burdened, but hopefully we can come to some solutions and some outcomes today, and that we can hear from none other than this crazy dynamic panel that we have. So cool. I'll just start with by screen and kind of have every person on this dynamic panel to just give a bit in terms of your background, a little bit about you, and then specifically kind of talk a little bit in terms of your lens of experience in the work of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So Tendai, you're the first on my right here. So we're gonna kick off with you, and then we'll kind of go from there. I'll cold call as we go along.
Great. Appreciate the conversation and appreciate being invited to participate and just give a little bit of experience and strength and hope, if you will. I think you're exactly right. It's, a very pertinent, irrelevant, and important conversation to be having. And if we don't address it and don't make it comfortable to talk about, then I think it, will perpetuate itself into the future. So kudos for even, coming to the table and having this conversation in our great community that I know that each and every one of us love and want to see continue to flourish and grow and be a part of and contribute to. So just by way of background, my name's Tendai Charasika. I was born and raised here in Louisville. I was fortunate enough, and relevant to my story, that, parents that one an immigrant from Zimbabwe, Africa, another one from a small town in Tennessee, and both just, entrepreneurs and educators as well. And so that, the big piece of my story is really relevant to my parents from that standpoint. But been involved in the business community since really having a passion for it as a young kid, and then watching both my parents, one owning and operating a small fabric store, and my father a physician and owning his own store as well, and his own office, medical practice, and things of that nature. And so took that in, and throughout the years, led me into running and growing a startup company called SuperFan. So it's a mobile technology company that really focuses on fan engagement for colleges, high schools, and professional teams all around the country. And so, from my perspective, in terms of, some of the ways that, trying to give back and be part of the, solution in the conversation here is that, I really try to be a role model. I think that what we don't have in our communities, particularly our communities of color, are role models, folks that you can wake up to every single day to kind of show you the pathway. And I think that's a real critical element to be able to remain focused and to be able to see that you can achieve your dreams in the business landscape. So again, I was fortunate enough to have two parents that had gone through that pathway, or are both entrepreneurs, continue to be. So I grew up understanding and knowing that you can achieve your dreams through business and different avenues and different channels. And so I think one of the things that, again, that I try to do is just be a role model to other, young kids, especially, is where my heart is at, especially those who maybe do not have fathers in this community. So that's a big piece for me, is just be a male African-American role model to all kids, but primarily and predominantly African-American kids, to show them that there is an opportunity and a pathway for them to achieve their dreams through business.
Yeah. Well, that's fantastic. I know, mentorship, we all know the power of mentorship, right? And what it's done for our lives, and couldn't have been even more of a better segue for the next person that's actually in order on my screen. So I'm going to bring up Dave Christopher, who's next here. But Dave, I mean, you're right in line with what Tendai was talking about, which is, exposure, right? You can't be what you can't see. And so tell us a little bit about your organization, Dave, and the support that you provide to the African American community and to really the greater community of Louisville. So I'll let you take it away there.
Thanks, Raechele. I appreciate it. Thanks for inviting me, and thanks for the opportunity. Dave Christopher Sr., the Executive Director and founder of AMPed. That's the Academy of Music Production, Education, and Development. We are free. We were originally, as we started out in 2014, when I founded the organization, it was a free music program for kids. We taught everything related to music. And we eventually got to a place where we realized that we were doing great work with these kids, and they were doing really well, but they were going back into homes where their families were struggling. So we realized that we can't just be a one-dimensional organization, that we have to open it up to basically a multi-generational model. And so we partnered in 2016 with the National Center for Families Learning to start an AMP Family Learning Program, where we did skills training for the adults in technology. I have a technology background. I started in IT. I actually left UPS and IT to start my first company, Tech Louisville, and then eventually Technical Solutions, and several other companies since then. So I'm gonna jump right to this point, and forgive me if I'm the controversial dude on the screen, but I just wanna push back on a couple things, because I'm all about asset framing. And one of the things that Tendai just said about being a good role model, that's extremely important. It's true. But I have to push back on the fact that there are no Black role models in those communities. That's not true. Those Black role models are just not being lifted up. They're not being given the opportunity, because we have this sort of, I'll just refer to it as a white savior thing, where we want to be the ones that come in and save these kids and these people, these folks in these communities, when there are people there on the ground that know what's going on, that have been struggling and fighting consistently day by day in these communities, that we just seem to brush by. I was reading an article that Anthony Smith sent to me, but it was actually written by Dorian Burton. And it says going from taking philanthropy from charity to justice. And so one of the things that we talk about in BME is asset framing, where we look at the positive notes about our Black folks. And like, so if you tell somebody, hey, did you know that there's more Black men in prison than there are in college? Everybody will raise their hand, yeah, I've heard that, but that's not true. It's actually a lie. But we know we've heard it and we know it. When we talk about role models, and again, Tendai, not to go at you, but when you say that there are Black young men that don't have Black fathers in their family, in their lives, that's also not true. Black men are the ones that spend the most time with their kids than any other race. And we just need to, when we're trying to have these conversations around equity, we need to start with the facts. We need to start with what's true and not what we just heard. Absolutely. We need to know that some of those, because here's the thing, is that people want to save us because they think we're broken. And the fact is, we're not broken. In the philanthropy, in the world of nonprofit, the sort of joke around nonprofit is the person that's the worst story best is the one that gets the money. Now, here's the problem with saying that my kids are broken or my families are broken, is that if I fix them, then you stop giving me money because I fixed them. But on the other side of that, if I don't fix them, you stop giving me money because I didn't fix them. When the fact is, they're not broken, they're under-resourced. I'm really careful about telling people that we empower our kids or empower our families or anything, because the truth is they walk through the door with what they need and the ability they need. They just don't have the resources to do what they need to do. And in the frame of Black businesses, I was doing some, reading some last night. I was telling the guys before we came on this, went live, was I really shouldn't have read that before I went to bed, because I had nightmares when I looked at Black business. When we look at like the nationwide, only 15% of the businesses in the United States are Black owned. The average income for those businesses is $25,000. Most of those businesses don't employ anybody. They're business, and especially in the nonprofit world, where most of the people that run nonprofits don't even receive a salary, because we don't look at nonprofits as businesses. My success and our success in AMP has been, I come from a business place. And I was that kid that grew up in Concord and Gary, Indiana, and the projects with two disabled parents. My mother had Parkinson's. She was in the bed most of the time because she was undiagnosed, had tremors. I was working at 12 years old. My father said to me, because he couldn't work, because nobody would hire him, if nobody will hire you, go out and hire yourself. But you have the responsibility of getting the tools that you need to do it. And I'm really careful about not putting the issue on the people versus the system that put the people in the place that they're in. We have to be, we're gonna have really honest conversations. When we talk about broken systems, none of those systems are broken. None of them are broken. Yeah. They're actually working just as they were intended to work, intentionally or unintentionally, whether anybody meant for it to happen that way or not. Here's the fact, is that if all of us are in a room, then we're not likely to think about the people outside of this room when we plan whatever we plan. So it's not insidious. I'm not, sometimes it is, sometimes it's intentionally done, but a lot of times it's just ignorance. In the IT world, and most Sloan can definitely speak to this, in the IT world, we are considered like unicorns. It's like, and it's not because I'm some genius that I can do technology. It's because I had the opportunity to do it, that people gave me the opportunity to do it. And so in our program, our adult learning program, and one of the things that I'm working on, I want to just talk really quickly about, is called the Russell Tech Business Incubator. We're looking at the access to capital and the ability for a person to incubate a business while they still earn a living, like while they can still feed themselves. And the thing that stops most businesses from being able to grow to any substantial size is that I have to choose between eating and starting my business. Absolutely. I have to, and then when I get out, I'm told that I can start a business with $5,000, and you can't, right? We don't have, when we talk about the startup community, and Larry, I'll just hit this real quick. When you talk about a Black business startup community, it does not exist. Me and Ben Reno Weber, and I think he's on this broadcast here, but he and I talked about this, is that as a white man, Ben can mess up as many businesses as he wants to, and then walk in the door and get another opportunity for another business. When I walk into a business, and I'm gonna add this too, of all the businesses I've started, in the many years I've been in business, I have not once ever gone to a bank for a loan, period. I've done what I was taught to do, stack up your money, then invest in yourself. But the opportunity is not there for us. That even when banks will give us the opportunity to get funding, they give it to us at a lesser amount at a higher interest rate. It's proven. And so we got to look at the way the systems are set up and be careful about saying that people, like I heard a young man that came to my house and was working on my deck and said, man, I'm out here trying to get it, and these people just don't want it. That's a lie. People don't know, can't want something they don't know about. If I've never seen a Learjet, how can I want a Learjet? And so we have to be careful about, if we are, and I don't mean it necessarily like this, but victimizing the victim. Blaming the people for not having enough gumption or not wanting to push hard enough. If I don't know, I don't know. And because the cards are stacked against me, I don't have the ability to last through all of the stuff that I have to deal with. So I'm gonna stop there because I don't want to take all the time.
Listen, Dave, you're spot on, number one. Number two, audience, if you didn't catch at least 3 gems from that one, from Dave, I'm telling you, you got me on so many levels, man. That was fantastic. And as I'm transitioning to this next person, literally it couldn't be spot on in terms of your experience and what you actually shared about, never going to a bank, never having the resources, and just, cutting your teeth and grinding it out for your business. And so, Vanessa, you're the next on my screen, and couldn't have been a better kind of layup in terms of the work that you do to Access Ventures and kind of the opportunity gaps that you guys see and how you're trying to create an inclusive economy. And so, definitely, as we pass it to you, talk a little bit more about what Dave's sharing here, validate a little bit more what you guys see from your lens and from your perch.
Yeah. Hi, thank you for that, Dave. I was taking notes as you were talking because I was like, I want to make sure that I touch on that, and that's how it connects to this other thing. So that was
too many gems, right?
Too many, yeah. So hi, everybody. My name is Vanessa Koenigsmark. I'm a senior associate for Access Ventures and also Render Capital, which is our regional fund focused on Louisville and Southern Indiana. And what I do is that I help build out capital solutions, capital programs for entrepreneurs to help improve the inclusivity and to better serve traditionally underrepresented entrepreneurs at all levels of capital need. Right off the bat, I am not an entrepreneur and I am not a Black or Indigenous person of color. So I am here in the capacity of knowing that I can speak to programs, I can speak to the approaches and what we've developed with Render Capital. I can speak to a lot of statistics and things like that, but in terms of like lived experience, I don't have that. So I'm here to learn from you guys. I have the pleasure of working with a lot of the people that are on this awesome panel, and for that, I'm super grateful. I will
say this, we're grateful for allies like you. That's what the representation you bring to this conversation. So carry on for sure. And
yeah, I think I'm fortunate to work for an organization like Access Ventures and Render Capital locally, that our focus is on addressing issues of inclusivity, on addressing issues of improving access to capital for entrepreneurs. And so rather than it being kind of a side piece or like a secondary consideration to the work that we do as a nonprofit, that is ultimately the work that we're trying to do. And so I have the luxury of having a lot of mental energy and brain time that goes towards figuring out not only what is the work that we're doing today, but how exclusively do we have an inclusion lens? Do we have a lens for making sure that we're serving those entrepreneurs that have traditionally been excluded by these systems that are working appropriately? They're not broken systems, they're doing exactly what they were intended to do. How do we change those systems so that they work for those entrepreneurs that exist? Kind of bouncing off of that, I wanted to really quickly kind of throw out this concept of like secondary solutions versus your primary purpose. And I think that what I've seen a lot of activity happening specifically as a result of the Black Lives Matter movement becoming more prevalent, a lot of the disruption and great conversations that are happening as a result of Breonna Taylor and police brutality in Louisville, is that we start to see like kind of this like secondary consideration, like, oh, now I need a D&I branch in my company, or now I need to make sure that we we check and see how many African American or Black people are being served by this program, and it becomes kind of like this concessionary or secondary solution to the main group of those that are served. And I just kind of want to point that out. I think about that as being kind of Band-Aid solutions versus just the way that we do business. And so when we're having conversations about how we better serve entrepreneurs, Black, Indigenous, and people of color, how do we think about it not in terms of creating a new program that's focused specifically on righting that wrong? Those programs are incredibly important, but that's a short-term solution. That's not the kind of solution that is going to be enduring and that's going to pick up those individuals that have been traditionally excluded. Once you raise those people up and you provide the traditionally under-resourced entrepreneurs with the same opportunities as others, they're in the same pipeline and they're being served by the same solutions. I think what can happen sometimes is that we create a grant program or an education program, and then when you get to the starting line, then the system takes over and it perpetuates inequality over again. And so there's kind of like two lenses that you have to take. It's like, what do we do right now? Because people are hurting, people are not being served appropriately, people are dying. But how do we also make sure that once somebody does get the opportunity and they somehow make it to the same starting line as somebody who's been privileged, they're not running slower because they've got a rock tied to their back, and this is a square peg in a round hole all over again. So I can speak more into the solutions and programs that we do with Render, but I feel like I'll jump in and add that as we have our conversation.
No, absolutely. I mean, and spot on with what you were saying there. And Chris is going to be my next person to go to. Chris, I think you can kind of piggy up right back where she cut off there on terms of just discussing those obstacles. I mean, talk a little bit about, you know, the work that you do, what you see from your lens and perspective, and really kind of this access to capital piece that you've opened up, Vanessa. I think, you know, we're really going to continue on that line of discussion of, you know, why aren't these entrepreneurs being overlooked, right? What are the needs there, and why is this $1 trillion opportunity that capital misses out on, right? What can we do about that? So Chris, you know, if you will take on that conversation and keep it going.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. I really appreciate you affording me the opportunity to be here with you all today. My name is Chris Red. I am from Milwaukee, Wisconsin originally. So, you know, as Raechele alluded to earlier, you know, the situation in Kenosha particularly hits pretty close to home. You know, my family, I have a lot of family in that area, so that is an unfortunate situation. So, you know, I'm definitely, you know, praying for all those that are been affected in that area. You know, we always have these conversations, and they're always are very difficult to have, and they're, as you know, the country is kind of in mourning in a sense. But when you have those things hit particularly close to home, you know, it's just another level of disheartening. You know, so, you know, definitely. Keeping that in my prayers, and also, you know, seeing some of the movement around the sports world yesterday and taking a stand was something that I thought it was a moment that I didn't want to go past, because I think at this point in time, we are here, we have to stand up in order to actually see some change, right? We have to take a stance. And so I just want to kind of start with that. But, you know, I am the co-creator and co-founder of Network and Chill. Network and Chill is as a local event here. Really, the connect founders, funders, anyone in the entrepreneurial community through storytelling, education, and really making it a truly inclusive environment. We believe that having a fun, inclusive environment is vital for this community. We know that collaboration is really key in any journey in this community, and we think by doing so we'll ultimately create some trust between Southern Indiana and all of Kentucky. So, you know, that work really came into play because originally not being from here, right? And so you understanding, kind of like Dave alluded to earlier, like having a Black startup community really doesn't exist here, right? And I early on realized that there was a lot of talent in this community that particularly did not come out to certain things, right? And I felt like, you know, particularly not being from here, because they probably went to events and didn't feel included. And so that's why this kind of cultivated and came out, because we really were thoughtful in curating a group of people to come together and actually want to connect and collaborate. And from there, organically, they started inviting other friends, because not only because it was a way to network, but it was a fun environment, right? We could learn from one another. And we were able to start really storytelling a lot of startups that were growing in this community that particularly before were underserved and really didn't have a highlight, right? So, you know, we were able to really start connecting with entrepreneurs like Mo is on here and give them a place to really talk about what he's working on and have some community feedback and involvement, right? And something that really stood out to me is I know the work was vital when after Mo actually was at an event, and I had a few founders come up to me afterwards at that event and said, I never saw Mo speak so authentically. It really opened my heart to hear him speak in that aspect. I've seen him in other forums, but I saw him in another element today, right? And so we realized that creating a safe environment, a safe place, that we can connect in another way. And so, you know, I thought that was really vital hearing from that feedback. And so, you know, I'm really passionate about continuing the work because we're looking at ways to create additional access to capital in this community, right? Especially for Black and Brown founders in this community. And, you know, I'm really passionate about, on top of that, creating new investors in that community to be a part of that journey as well, to really curate that wealth gap on both sides, creating new business owners and new business investors, right? And so that kind of has led me now down the path as well, doing some great work with Vanessa now as the innovator in residence over at Render Capital as well. And I'm really excited about some of the work we'll be doing down the line this year as well to really create additional access to capital for companies.
Awesome, fantastic. And thanks for sharing too about the power of just bringing an authentic space for people to come in and really share and see one another for themselves, right? To be seen and to be heard. It's super, super important. And fantastic to even hear too, just being able to play both sides of that access to capital and trying to fulfill that gap, right? And so my last two that I do have for today's conversation, actually Mo is to my immediate next, but I know that both Mo and Angelique, you two can definitely talk to this specific realm around your experience as founders, the lack of access to capital, resources, and the wherewithal of your experience as founders, you know, here in the community. So Mo, I'll tag into you for a few reasons. One, we're on this line of conversation, right, about, you know, the access gaps that founders have. You know, Chris even alluded to the opportunity about, you know, lack of talent access, right? That there's these incredibly talented people here in the city, and we just may not see them at the everyday startup grind or the everyday kind of happy hour, the everyday this. Mo, you're a perfect example of that because of your beginnings, right? Being at a big co, right? Being at one of the Fortune 500s here in town. So share a little bit about, you know, your story, but also allude to your experience, man, of working in this market, trying to, you know, dig through the payment to get capital for your company, and talk about the incredible things that's ahead for you and your company.
Sure. Thank you, Raechele. I appreciate it. My name is Mohammed Sloan. I go by Mo. I'm CEO and founder of Easy Chow. And what we do at Easy Chow is we're a digital customer engagement platform for restaurants. So make a long story short, we help restaurants pivot even before COVID and become e-commerce businesses. As some people have alluded to, I started the company back in 2015. I never had intentions of becoming an entrepreneur. I realized it was a combination of my kids getting a little bit older and my desire to leave a legacy and my desire to, you know, create generational wealth. And I was content. I was content working for a large corporation such as Humana, but I realized there was a glass ceiling there. And so I started looking at ways to just improve myself, to prepare myself for the next opportunity. I dabbled in some couple of different things, but talked to basically how it happened. It was very organic. I like Boombox Pizza. Sent them an email, said, hey, why don't you guys have online ordering? And that was the beginning of me going down this path where we developed a software platform to solve problems in the restaurant and hospitality space, democratizing technology with our platform. But yeah, so it's been very challenging to grow this company and get it to this point. And I'm on maybe step 3 of a 100-step journey. And every day it's a challenge and everything. And it's funny because I was talking with a couple of people the other day and was like, I'm not sure I would do this again, even knowing what I know now because of the challenges that are involved. But I did get started. I was fortunate enough that my parents, Tendai alluded to, I had parents that realized the value of education. And although I'm a huge basketball fan, I'm only 6 feet tall and got asthma. So the dreams of getting into the NBA weren't going to happen for me. But so even when I was a kid, I started programming and writing code when I was 7 years old. And kind of as Dave alluded to, people are like, look at me as if I'm a genius. I'm like, no, I'm not a genius. I just know how to write code, right? I just follow logic and can do that kind of stuff. So, but that was cultivated at an early age. And I needed to also express gratitude to several people on this panel. For example, Chris has helped me tremendously in getting our first round of funding closed. And Vanessa with Access Ventures and Render Capital, they were the ones that came in at the end and put the last bit of money we needed to close out the round. If they didn't do that, I'm not sure, I'll be sitting here in this spot now. So very fortunate to work with and meet people who are invested, whether or not they have a financial interest or not, just in the success of our company and the desire to see a tech startup from Louisville, Kentucky, that happens to be minority owned, make it and be a unicorn out of this region. And I believe very strongly in that we have that capability and that roadmap is in front of us. So, but yeah, working today, Dave said a lot, and a lot of the stuff what he said was true. I had to continue working for Humana. I worked for them till 2019, right? Until we got our first bit of funding that allowed me to quit. I had to keep working for them because I couldn't stop and say no. I couldn't follow this dream without providing income. I had a roof to keep over my head and keep my children fed, had bills to pay. So it was a grind. It was a hustle. I basically worked 2 full-time jobs, and not everybody can do that, and I'm aware of that. So I was fortunate enough that I was able to make that work. But yeah, if you want to accomplish something, sometimes you just have to put your head down and go after it, and not if you hit a wall, go around it, or go over top of it, or go through it. So you just have to be determined in your belief system and what you want to do.
Sorry, I didn't know that I was muted, guys. Thanks so much, Mo. Thanks again for sharing that. And it's super, super encouraging to hear, this connective web, right, that we have here, even on the screen here, and even folks that are in this conversation, right? There are champions out there that are plugging away every single day, giving day in and day out to try to make that opportunity realized for entrepreneurs like you to be a unicorn. And hear that. You heard it here first, folks. A unicorn out of Louisville, Kentucky. It can happen, right? And so getting to our final panelists here, and I'll start to kind of throw more questions, guys, as we go, of course, but definitely wanted to give the credence and opportunity for everyone to kind of share their story, their narrative, and their experience. So none other than Dr. Angelique Johnson is what we'll kind of lead to here. Dr. Angelique, first and foremost, Mo had a couple of nuggets that I know can give some credence to your story and your journey. He talked about, setting up a legacy, right, for his future generations, and the pride that he had around doing that, and how that was a motivator for him. And he also talked about kind of the experience itself as a entrepreneur in this community. Talk about a little bit within your journey and within your framework and the incredible work that you do for Louisville and for Black founders in our community. What can our community do better? Because I know for a fact that there's tons of opportunities here, opportunity gaps that we can fill and actionable things we can bring to bear. So tell us your story, but also, give us some nuggets here on what our community can also do to help.
Cool. Well, thank you again for, for allowing me to serve on this panel. I'm filling in for a missing panelist, but I will do my best to try and represent her well. I always refer to myself as an accidental entrepreneur. My PhD is in electrical engineering from the University of Michigan. I was set to be an engineer in industry, to be making good money and easy money. And somehow along the way, I got into the whole startup culture and formed my business MEMStim, which makes implantable components for devices that treat things like hearing loss, blindness, chronic pain, and the like. A lot of our investment is actually, all of our investment actually has been non-dilutive. That has been our strategy. I came out of Michigan, University of Michigan, which is in Ann Arbor, is not Silicon Valley, but it actually has a lot of investment going on. And so I'm a little bit different in that region, when we came out in the university setting and you're pitching, and I was pitching nationally, raising money didn't seem like a big thing. Because I had angel investors, and I had, people that were kind of say, hey, can I invest? But I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I didn't want to be responsible for somebody else's millions of dollars, and I don't even have faith in this thing. So although I kind of started this journey in 2011, it wasn't really till 2014, 15, 14 really that I said, okay, let me go ahead and do this for real, which is why I have a lot of patience for entrepreneurs that may have an idea, but not be sure, right? Are they going to make, like Mo, are you going to make the sacrifices for it? Sometimes it takes a while to get to that point where you're like, okay, I'm willing to sacrifice it all, especially when you have other things you can be doing that make a lot more money in a corporate world. And I didn't come from much money. My family was relatively poor growing up. I have 10 siblings, there's 11 kids. So my parents were both entrepreneurs, that's true enough, but I never saw the rich and famous side of entrepreneurship. I just saw the sweat, the blood, and the poverty. So it wasn't something I was looking to do. In terms of, before I even get into what we could do in terms of entrepreneurship, I do want to take the opportunity to call out the names of Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, countless others that had been murdered by the hands of the police. And so I think the first thing that this community can do better is arrest the cops that killed Breonna Taylor. That's the very first thing. And I think we all should be calling on that, and not just because it's a matter of us against the police or any protesters against the police or anything like that. We have to recognize that the same mentality, the same bias that led to a young lady getting shot up in her bed on the west end of Louisville is the same bias and mentality that leads to Black startups not being funded, that leads to not having, like Dave Christopher mentioned, not giving people the resources so that they can thrive, not just survive, but do well. And so I think if we can't recognize that mentality at its most brutal state, then what hope is there for us to have a conversation like this and get people to understand, and when we're talking about wealth and money, if you can't understand lives, then you can't understand wealth and money and the value in giving a Black entrepreneur a chance. If you can't understand the value in giving a Black female, in Louisville, Kentucky, a chance at living life. So that's just something I do want to bring up and hearken to that, and hope that I think some people might be confused as to, well, why are you so upset about it? As much as people, why are you so upset about it? This has been happening, we got names, we got Trayvon Martin, we got George Floyd. Why are you so upset now about it? And it's really, because people have been upset the whole time. It's a boiling point. And one of the things that, hearing out about the sports teams going on protests, well, I've been saying for months, look, I'm gonna start protesting boards. If you want me to serve on a board as a diversity theater cast member, then no. And I always give people an opportunity to show me who they are. And I always want to have an opportunity to do good in the community and to do outreach. I've done programming around entrepreneurship. Mo was one of our early businesses that came through our accelerator program. I've always done that, but I always have to keep in mind, I have limited amount of time, and I don't want to serve on a board to lend my voice to issues that don't affect my community and the people in my community So it's basically the same script, a different cast. And Vanessa, I think, hearkened to that concept of, we don't just want to just put placeholders and do things like that. Even to this panel, I mean, I'm so happy to be here. I'm happy that Amplify is doing this, but I also want us to recognize that, diverse voices, Black voices have value outside of just talking about Black issues. As one of my friends put it, during this time, there's a lot of us, I'm sure everybody on this panel has been getting the phone calls and the emails, and will you come share your Black experience? And I never thought about it this way until she summed it up so perfectly what the feeling was. But she said, no, I refuse to participate in what she calls trauma porn. And it really can become that if you're not talking about actionable steps to do something about it, if you just want to hear the stories. And so that's why I'm happy that, Raechele, you made it clear that this is not just about, trauma porn. This is about actionable steps that we can take, that, starting with Amplify and moving forward with other organizations. I'm on the board of Amplify. Just letting Larry know right now, I hope to have a voice. If I don't, get prepared for the pick and sign. But I believe that I will have a voice in Amplify just based off the people that are on that board. But in Kentucky, I think one of the barriers, and I'm just going to speak a little bit more specific to Kentucky and entrepreneurship, is, like I said, in Michigan, nationally we have these injustices happening. But in Michigan, when it came to the entrepreneurial community, it almost felt like, I had all this racism against me. Trust me, I had some really terrible racist and sexist experiences at Michigan. But it almost seemed like there was just a sliver of, once you start talking and I hear what it is you're pitching, and I understand math and I see the value in it, okay, where can I sign up? Where can I get the term sheet? I mean, when I tell you, they were beating down I'm not gonna come back again. But when in Kentucky, there seems to be this extreme overvaluation on personal, do I know you? Well, if the community is so segregated, if Louisville's so segregated, what are the odds of you knowing a Black investor before you have the opportunity to invest in them? What is the odds of you having surrounded yourself with Black entrepreneurs to know about that? So I think that Louisville it needs to work on not compartmentalizing Black entrepreneurs, Black experts, Black thought leaders, just the topics of Black, but also needs to work on stop evaluating any business based off of your comfort level socially and your social experience with a demographic that entrepreneur is representing. So those are just a little bit here, a little bit there, but those are just some thoughts that I have around it.
That's fantastic. No, you definitely opened some really good opportunities just to parlay into some more dialogue there. Specifically just thinking back, first and foremost, your statements, right, around, what we're witnessing in terms of, the devaluing of Black life, right? And because of that devaluing of Black life that we witness, it not necessarily that it's a trickle effect into the economics of our society, but it's almost like that, like you said, a boiling point, right? It's now come to a head, a sense, to where we all, there's no guess of where it comes from, right? There's no guess that these things are systemic and that they're driven by, over 400 years of continued, discrimination and bias and things of that nature. But that devaluing can also get coupled to a cheapening of Black economic, growth, right? We cheapen the Black founder, we cheapen the female founder, we cheapen, these overlooked founders that, like you said, have the same economics, the same, market opportunities, and can grow just as big as the next, right? And so because they don't fit into that model of what entrepreneurship typically looks like from the Valley, right? There's so many things that you've uncovered there just in terms of, how we can really, take that into consideration and to actionably see how Louisville can be different, right? If we simply try to be a carbon copy of Silicon Valley, well, heck, the statistics don't even lie, right? On the diversity problems and the gaps from a talent perspective, from a venture perspective, from a VC representation perspective, right? Of how many folks that lead funds that are persons of color, right? It's across the board. in this particular realm. And so, we can't be a carbon copy of becoming the next innovation city or the next innovation, a hub, and carbon copy those same issues within the lens of diversity, right? And those things come to mind when what you shared. On the flip side of that too, I mean, let's just kind of do round robin here, guys. Come in as you wish on this notion that she brought up too as well about capital, right? And not just simply the conversation of access to capital, but you said it, right? There's kind of this notion in Louisville around the social network play of capital, of who you know, who is your father, what high school you went to, what school you come from, right? What's your background? What's, oh, you're not from here, cool. So that's and let's talk about that a little bit in terms of, just the knowledge gap, right? There's this knowledge gap of recognizing a deal as a deal and not having these interlinked layers of lens around the actual opportunity set for that founder or for that company. And anybody can come in onto this particular topic here about capital. So,
because one thing quickly is that raising capital, I'm not going to deny this, it's always a social game. Yeah. It is always a social game. But the point that you made, Raechele, is really critical. Usually when you're raising capital as a startup founder, you have to work your way around the social investment player, the startup scene, get to know the players. And it's like, hey, I talked to Larry. Larry thought it was a good idea. Okay, I talked to Tendai. Tendai thought it was a good idea. So then if Ben comes up to the two of them and says, hey, I heard about this company, MEMStim, is it a good idea or not? Well, yeah. So you're building social capital there. But the difference in Kentucky, the difference in Louisville is that the social capital starts when you come out the womb. So it's not something you can build here. It's something that you got to build coming out of here. So, not to be graphic about it, and so that to me is the key difference. And you can't build a new family structure that originated generations back in Louisville.
Yep, I call it the hive mentality. All the honey is in this one little hive, and nobody's allowed in that space ever. It doesn't, and it's what's hilarious about it to me is that when they do let any honey drip outside of that hive for other folks to get a hold to, they consider it a favor to you, like as if you didn't have a great idea that would be successful. They're doing you a favor. When you talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, it's insulting to me that you think I should be thankful that you let me walk into the room that you will not let me speak in or listen to me when I speak, right? And so when going back to what I said about there actually really isn't a real Black startup community. There's some Black startups that have been successful, and I've seen some of those on the screen today, right? But there are so many other businesses, like I was talking about earlier, about the average income of most 15% of Black businesses in the US, the average income is $25,000. That's how much they make a year. And so there is often, and it's funny because those folks want to get credit for the successful folks like Mo, as if Mo didn't have a great idea that deserved everything that he got. You want to believe that you did Mo a favor by listening to Mo and taking a chance on Mo. If Mo looked different than Mo looks, you would have been beating down his door to get at his product. Absolutely. You know what I'm saying? So I think that's something that we need to get around. And just to Angelique's point, is that that's one of the unfortunate things about Louisville, Kentucky, that I've seen, is that there are 7, if I got this number correct, 7 or maybe 8 families that basically have control of everything that occurs, that everything flows from those names, right? And if you don't have, if you will, the write-off or the signature or the sign-off from those folks, you will struggle till you die. Yeah, no,
spot on, guys, on that. And I know too, at least for timing, I know we had talked about doing a bit of a Q&A. Larry, if you can kind of, harp on if there's any questions that come in that it's like right on spot with this conversation, let's go for it. But to your point, guys, I mean, it very much is, this is the things that experientially we see, both on this notion of knowing it's about who you know, right? That gets you into the door. I also want to bring to bear too, this really kind of interesting concept around the knowledge gap. And what I mean by that is, we do successful founders like Mo, like so many others, that get cheapened in the economics of their funding. And then when they go for future funding, or when they're able to rise above our specific region towards, larger opportunities for institutional capital, right? There's this plaguing that we see of founders getting gut checked early because we had the lack of sophisticated and smart capital. Now that is beyond not even a diversity play, right? When we're talking about diversity here, this conversation is specifically, of course, around, for founders of color, for diverse founders, but from a geographic region diversity, concept, that's something that our region lacks in. Chris, I've seen you kind of get off the mute here, right? Like, tell us a bit about that, what you see in terms of
you're absolutely right. I mean, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, Mo and I actually talked about this yesterday, right? And so, like, throughout this journey, like even like last year having our startup week, we really understood some things that I saw during our startup week that, really understanding that we had a big knowledge gap, right? Meaning that a lot of entrepreneurs in this community may not leave out this region at all and haven't seen a different lens, right? And we said it earlier, if you don't see it, you can't really believe it, right? And then as you start achieving some success, you don't really have those other founders or entrepreneurs in the community that are a step above you to really talk about that, right? So, the gap from Mo and somebody else in this community, that an entrepreneur that's like 10 steps ahead of him, it's gonna be hard for him to grab that access from somebody around here. So, I've been talking to Mo and other entrepreneurs, like early on, I say, understand the market, just take a trip somewhere else. I mean, there's a lot of opportunities right from Cincinnati, Indianapolis that have some bigger players in the market, and you might not be ready for that kind of funding yet, but engage in conversation, keep them in the loop, have monthly updates with them, because those people are really willing to talk to you and keep track of you, especially if you like saying, I'm growing this amount of months each month, and you just keep them in the loop. There, you can really start having conversations early on and understand what they're looking for, right?
Yep.
And I think it gives you a great lens of what you want, kind of like Angelique alluded. Maybe she didn't want that kind of financing, but early on, you should be thinking about this prior to the decision, so you know how you want to finance your company and who you should be talking to. I think it's really important for all entrepreneurs to do so. Hopefully down the line, with Network and Share, we're bringing some of those folks that before that now we can have it virtually to have those kind of conversations, so you can kind of understand from some venture partners around the country what they're looking for and what stages they're looking for.
Yeah. I mean, that's actionable, right? That's something actionable of learning, not only teaching the founder, right? Teaching our future founders how to do their own diligence, right? And how to be diligent in terms of, their company and what they foresee for themselves from a capital perspective, from a growth perspective, the types of people that, that are important to bring around the table for your vision and for your dream, right? Because your dream, is your baby, right? It's your company, it's what you're growing. And for our region, it's the job creator for the future, right? So we have to take full advantage of the opportunities that we have and the support of folks, like Render, like so many others that understand the dynamics and the challenges of that founder. Getting them surrounded with the mentorship, the knowledge, the advisory that's needed. Man, fantastic.
Raechele, can I say something real quick?
Absolutely. Larry, I'm telling you, you just pulled the coattails here on this conversation because it can get good. So go ahead, Mo.
So a couple of things. One is David was alluding to about, a lot of the topics that he mentioned. I've resigned myself to the fact that you've got to be better, strong. You just have to be better, right? That's the way it's always been, right or wrong. So I've kind of resigned myself to the fact, and that's how it was when I was growing up. So it's kind of, I'm used to it. Now that doesn't mean it's right. I'm just used to that environment.
Double click on that a little bit, Mo, just for the folks. Yeah. I'm thinking about audience in context. When you say I have to be better, lay in a little bit on what you mean by that.
For example, that kind of leads into my next subject, right? So sometimes I wonder if generating revenue as early as we did wasn't actually a detriment, because what happened is people look at us as, how much revenue are we generating versus what the potential is, right? And so a lot of times I had to make short-term decisions based upon trying to keep the lights on because I didn't have resources that saw the full vision, right? And so when it's like anything else, I kicked the can down the road, and that was my philosophy. I had to get it to the next step, whatever it took, get it to the next step, whatever it took, get it to the next level. Sometimes that's a good thing, sometimes it's a bad thing because you can be forced into situation, into decisions you may not have made if you had more flexibility. And in regards to like our evaluation, et cetera, we in my personal opinion, we were very undervalued even at the amount of our monthly recurring revenue at the time. But I did what I had to do in order to grow the company and make the company get it to the next level. And so it's just sometimes that's it puts you it forces you into decisions that, man, you look back, it's like, hey, I wish I would have done it like that, you know. And unfortunately, the climate in Kentucky is different than the climate in other metropolitan hubs. For example, I had a meeting with a couple of people even before I met you and Dr. Johnson and Chris and a lot of people here. I was in Chicago. I had some meetings with some investment attorneys. And they're like, if you got a decent idea with pre-revenue, you get like a $10 million valuation on a convertible note, a valuation cap. And and that was amazing to me because that's not the climate, that's not the environment that we have here. So, there's no crying over spilled milk. You got to work with what you have. It's just that, unfortunately, the way it is, as Dr. Johnson alluded to it, that there's things against you, there's strikes against you here. You just have to overcome them and focus and hopefully rectify. Hopefully we'll fix the equity issue. We'll fix the valuation down the line. It's just, we just had to do what we had to do to get it going.
I do want to, that point about this revenue is a very critical point. I judge and evaluate businesses across the nation. Johnson & Johnson just did a $100,000 pitch competition exclusively for Black med tech companies. And we have this, and this concept of, in Louisville, there seems to be this, and I don't know if it's Kentucky, because I won't even say Kentucky, because AppHarvest got a lot of money. And I don't know that they have any revenue to show for it, right? That's the normal course of how this should work. Yeah. And, so I think, here, what we have is, whenever I'm judging a competition or I'm evaluating a business as part of something, there's always this question of revenue as if investment dollars are the same thing as bank dollars, and they're not the same thing. And so I think we don't have any unicorns yet in Louisville, Kentucky, or we have some actually, and like I say, we don't have any, but we don't have as many as we'd like because we're not stacking the deck in our favor. You have to have a lot of startups to get in the odds games of having a few that become these billion-dollar companies, but we cut people off at the head because they don't have revenue, because I don't think there's a full understanding here about this concept of a startup not having revenue, which is, I think, quite obvious in many other cities. But here, I'm not sure where it started from, but it's a very hard concept, I think, for a lot of people here to understand that concept. And going after revenue actually can decrease your ability to scale. And people see that in other areas. And we've seen plenty of businesses have gone, Lord have mercy, recently in our time, right, that have gone public and haven't figured out what they're gonna sell yet. So I don't think that we're doing ourselves a good service by undervaluing companies. And if we're gonna play the startup game, we gotta play the startup game. We can't play the small business game.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, guys, I know we're a little bit over on time. And what I'll do between Dave, we'll have you say a bit of this last sort of round. Larry, you just kind of let me know of how you want to tie the bow on this. It sounds like definitely, according to this panel, this is definitely a continued dialogue and a continued conversation that needs to happen. More specifically, too, this is definitely, a part of the long tenured work that needs to happen, right? And you have a ton of fantastic, cadre of leaders here that would be willing and would love to see, either bringing back this group or some others to bring more, perspective to the conversation. Dave, I'll let you get your last statement in here, and then we'll try to tie a bow on this conversation if we can.
Yeah, it'll be really quick. I just want to speak to something Mo said that I thought was really to the point, and that just speaks to the resiliency of Black folks. and what we've been used to dealing with and having to go through. And I agree, I actually put in the chat, I can't cry and be mad every day. I just have to push forward and get done what I need to get done, understanding what the scenery is and what the situation is. So I just want to applaud Mo, because I know that that's what that is, that's what you were taught. That's how you were taught. My father used to say this, is that we know what the problem is. The solution is on the other side. And so no matter what that is, we keep pushing for that solution. And that's just who we are. But imagine if the landscape changed, and how much more greatness would come from what we already can do, because we the folks that took chitlins and made it a meal. You know what I'm saying? So I just, so I'm gonna end with that.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much, guys. I've seen a couple of the questions kind of come through. Larry, I think we can, if you want to kind of parlay to some continuous answering questions, or I'm happy to do like a Twitter live AMA or something. We can come up with a creative way to do that. One particular question that I would kind of like, before passing it over to you, Larry, a lot of questions on how can we start addressing these issues, what's some tactical things. Today's conversation gave light to sort of the experiential sense of kind of what founders are facing. And so for us, more than anything, right, the tactical thing is to transition from an acknowledgement of this issue, an acknowledgement in a roundabout way of what's been seen, what's been heard, and acknowledging and validating it, believing the people on this panel with what they've seen, and knowing that that's true, and moving towards accountability, meaning, okay, we're talking about this capital issue, right? We're talking about this talent kind of gap issue. We're talking about the community plague issue. Personally, there's some things you can do. There's also, from an entrepreneur community standpoint, make the hire, right? If your team doesn't reflect what the community looks like, make the hire, diversify your team, right? Write the check. We're talking about capital access and gaps right now, right? If you have the capacity to do so, write the check and handle the deal as if you would handle it with any other founder, because we're no different, and our outsized returns are just as great as some of the other opportunity sets here. And then lastly, of course, too, as an organization itself, check out your procurement, right? Check out what who are you doing business with? These are just, again, this is a sliver of the incredible talent within our city of entrepreneurs, of founders, of community builders who are very much capable, right? So, in every, myriad of ways, right, from this conversation that we can continue to say and to share on ways in which to be tactical and be actionable. But it's not great to go straight to action until you're able to acknowledge and become aware of the experience. And so I'm so excited. I'm thankful for the opportunity to hear everyone's experience on this panel today. And of course, Larry, I'll drop my email on here for anyone that wants to talk more, to learn more, to continue the dialogue in any way. Again, there's also resources here in the city of diversity and inclusion experts, African-American led companies in our city that can help you navigate this for your company, for your organization. And so happy to give you a list of recommendations, right? Happy to give you a reading list to continue the awareness kind of, grabbing. Because again, turning this conversation into actionable insights, we have to first acknowledge the problem and become accountable to the problem so that Louisville can move forward. So yeah, that's my bow tie to the conversation. Thanking every single panelist here. Larry, I give it back to you.
No, Raechele, that was fantastic. Thank you so much. Thank you to everyone on the panel for your time today in this great open dialogue and conversation. I think like Raechele said, this is one of many conversations that we have to have and continue to have. I know from Amplify, we want to have those conversations. You can always reach out to us. I know we had some questions that we didn't get a chance to, and I think to Raechele's point, we can send this to our panelists, see if we can get some way to collect some answers and share that out. And we hope to do more of these conversations. So again, thank you to everyone. Oh, and one last piece, we did record this, and so we'll send the recording out to all the participants. Share it. Like, this was such an important conversation. Please share this with your groups, your network, so as they can see the conversation that happened and they can be a part of the dialogue as we continue to move forward. So I want to thank everyone for joining us tonight. Again, thanks to all of our wonderful panelists. Raechele, of course, you rocked it being the host. So I really appreciate it. And have a safe and wonderful night, everyone. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. You guys take care. Blessings and balance, guys.